Hello, it's David Hunt, CEO and founder of Hyperion Executive Search. I'm joined on our Leadership Insights session today by Gavin White, who's the CEO and co-founder of About Energy. Gavin and his co-founder have constructed a phenomenal non-executive and advisory board. And I just wanted to share some thoughts as to how and why you went about that, Gavin. We did, by the way, do a podcast episode. You can find out all about Gavin and About Energy, and we'll leave the link below for watching or listening to the podcast. But essentially a battery startup, SaaS or software business. But again, it's a very young company. You've got a phenomenal board. And I just wanted to get from you, Gavin, how and when you chose to allocate some of your time and resource to creating that when there are thousands of other things as a founder that you could have been doing.
Yeah, for sure. As we discussed in the podcast, David, like a key piece of advice I got and I'll never forget is that you become wise when you start learning from other people's mistakes instead of making them for yourself.
Yeah.
And as you know, with the startup, it's basically all about growth. It's like you have to try and grow as quickly as you can so that you can raise investment, so like the capital becomes much cheaper, and so that you can capture market share and customers as well.
Yeah.
And when it comes to growth, you're just constantly making decisions. You have hundreds and hundreds of decisions to make every single week, and some of them are really important, like really big decisions, like what sort of customers you should take on, what sort of investors to bring in, what sort of like whether to take on loans or to take on equity finance, etc. And really, when it comes, it's like them decisions are going to be what defines the company's success and growth rate.
Yeah.
So the way I've always thought about it is, well, one, bringing in expert advisors that can you can learn from their mistakes. And a good advisor, in my experience, they never tell you what to do. They just ask you questions until you kind of figure out what you need to do yourself.
Yeah.
But then more specifically, why we wanted to bring some of them advisors onto the board is really to bring them into the most critical decisions.
Yeah.
And bringing somebody into your board, I think some people see it as like a very expensive in terms of like equity or cash. But actually, in the grand scheme of things, like it's not very much for the huge value that they can bring.
Right.
Like if a director can, help you with decisions that can maybe grow your business by 5 or 10% a year, then that's a huge return on investment compared to what you're typically paying for them. So the way I always think about it is like, as a founder and as a CEO, what you're trying to solve for is like the growth. You're trying to grow your business as quickly but also sustainably as possible, and bringing in the right people to support you on that, I think, is money well spent.
I think you touched on it there. It's value versus cost, isn't it? It's not always easy. As a startup, every penny counts. So clearly cost is not unimportant, but that recognition, actually the value that the right set of advisors or non-executive directors can bring to the business is, again, testament to you for firstly coming to that conclusion and clearly going about that. But perhaps you can also touch on then how you went about it, because you've got some very high profile and very successful non-execs on your board, and again from both a technical and from a business perspective, who bring a lot of assets and a lot of value to the business. But how did you actually go about that?
Yeah, for sure. So like the very first one was a guy called Neil Morris, who used to be he was the founding CEO of the Fard Institution, which is like the UK's government body to kind of stimulate battery research in the UK.
Yeah.
Neil used to be an executive at BP and was the CEO of a private oil and gas company. So he's got lots of executive experience, and then spent 5 years basically working on batteries in the UK. And when we were starting the company, Neil was kind of put to us as our advisor.
Right.
And effectively became our business dad. And Neil has been so invaluable in helping us in the very, very early days just get off the ground. And then after Neil, that kind of rolled into a number of other people. There's a guy called Rishi Khosla, who's one of the co-founders and CEO of Oak North Bank. And Oak North, like a multi-billion-dollar fintech in London. Rishi's really passionate about entrepreneurism and actually coaches and mentors me about once every 2 months to kind of guide us in business decisions. And then more recently, we brought on, you probably know, a guy called Thierry Bollery, who's CEO of Renault and Jaguar Land Rover. And then also Andrew Gilbert, who used to be one of the executives at Qualcomm. And these people have like immeasurable experience, and they really help us with so many things across the business. But I remember when I worked at Aston Martin, I got taught you need to learn how to like manage your manager, and with advisors, the exact same thing. Like, you go to them with like a very clear, this is what I want to get out of this relationship. Like I want help on like business strategy or operations, and when you do like that and you make it clear to people and then you talk about your problems, it's very natural. But I think a key part of this is finding the right people and then like making it very clear to them how they can add value. And if you're not clear on that, then it's never going to work.
Yeah, I think it's one of those clarity things which, again, often people think they want a board or recognize somebody and think there's, there's some value can be had, whether it's the black book or whether it's the technology or whatever. But actually having a really clear picture from your perspective as a founder to what exactly you want to get from those individuals. So there's that clarity. And we touched on this on the podcast of clarity of vision and culture and understanding of what exactly wanted to be achieved. But I think, again, it's great that you've been able to recognize the importance of a board and then put together a phenomenal board in such a relatively short period of time for a very young company. And it was just good to get your insight as to how you've managed to do that and to why. But perhaps we just to close on this little session, you've touched on a little bit of, clearly they bring a substantial amount of business advice, but how much have they helped you and your founding team and Kieran from an individual perspective? Because again, you're both young entrepreneurs.
Yeah, immeasurably, to be honest. Like as young entrepreneurs, it can be quite a lonely experience as well. Like it's a lot of pressure, a lot of stress to deal with when you've kind of never went through this before. And just having people that they kind of become like coaches and mentors to you as well.
Yeah.
When you are struggling or there's a particular problem, that you can kind of go to them and talk it through with them. And then you realize from like all their experience and kind of what's going to be ahead of you is that this isn't a big problem. And you can actually break it down. It's quite simple. Like really just talk about what's all the issues at hand, and then the solution becomes very clear.
Yeah.
They've been incredible, like personally for myself and Kieran, to really like stabilize us in these roles.
Yeah.
Because it's very, very turbulent, especially growing at this kind of rate. And to have people that you can not lean on, but are there to like support you, has been super valuable. Yeah. No, super. And again, I think we touched on the policy in that ability, you don't know what you don't know, and having people who've perhaps been there and made the mistakes before, not necessarily to tell you what to do, but to sort of at least get you to ask the right type of questions of yourself. Cool. So thank you very much for sharing those thoughts with us, Gavin, and thanks for sharing the time on the podcast previously. If you are constructing a board and you are a startup, then obviously do reach out to myself or the Hyperion team. It's something we're very keen to do and we have a lot of experience of doing for clients. But the importance of board, hopefully we just touched on there in terms of what they bring to you as an individual and what they clearly can bring to your business journey is phenomenal. But it's also something not to go about lightly and to be very deliberate about, as Gavin and the team at About Energy have. But Gavin, thanks for sharing your thoughts. No, thanks very much. Appreciate it, David.